Haru, a high school loner, gets isekai'd to a medieval monkey's eyebrow with his classmates. After being left with the trashiest skills, he uses his virgin energy to convert them into Thanos tier skills. He aims to live like Sid the Sloth, but his sexy classmates are all about getting up in his business, not giving him a moment of peace. Meanwhile, Haru spends his classroom break alone reading manga under his desk like a weeb, while the rest of his classmates have fun. He doesn't vibe with any of the class groups, which includes the future juvenile delinquents, the gym protein junkies, the dim-witted baddies, the dweebs, and the class Karens. Regardless, he tries to sneak in a short nap when a magical light appears in the classroom. Haru wakes up realizing he is about to be transported into another world. However, he doesn't feel like it is worth his time and decides to take a pass on this one. He tries to leave the classroom, but his skinny, spaghetti arms are too weak to open the door. Thinking quickly, he desperately crawls into an air vent to escape. Unfortunately for him, the glowing circle catches up to him and isekais him anyway. He wakes up alone in an empty white room. Confused, he wishes for a baddie princess to pop out of thin air and explain what is going on. This wish does not come true. Instead, he is approached by a crazy, homeless man making weird signs at him like a crackhead.
What a joker!
Somehow, Haru's virgin brain figures out what he is trying to say. Apparently, his classmates had already been here and had been given skills to pick before going to the new world ahead of him. The man orders Haru to pick his skills quickly, but unfortunately for this dork, all the useful sounding skills are gone. Haru asks why he is left with low-level skills, and the man explains that he had underestimated the number of students he summoned, so Haru is stuck with the trash skills. This pisses Haru off, and he shakes the old geezer for being an incompetent fool. Unfortunately, the man loses his patience and dumps all the trash skills on Haru before kicking him out. He wakes up alone in the new world with his basket of skills that leaves him at the mercy of every creature that breathes. Haru discovers his magical bag has infinite space.
Well.
Making those noob items suddenly worth keeping. He tries to check his stats, but just then, dice appears on his palm. He rolls them, landing on him, even though Haru assumes it means minus for his already legendary wimp loser stats. He decides to assign it to his luck stat anyway. Shockingly, M means max, instantly maxing his luck. His impressively weak status also unlocks some truly helpful hidden abilities, clearly meant to stop him from becoming instant monster chow. Alone and blessed with 0 building skills, he decides to make himself a shelter. Haru wanders the forest cluelessly before realizing he can't sense monsters. But plot armor saves his ass when he finds magic contacts in his bag. These bad boys let him scan stats like a damn cheat code. He uses them to find edible mushrooms, the kind that won't make you hallucinate, unlike what your shady cousin sells. He also finds a stream to fill his water can. Later, he discovers a cave bigger than the space in his skull where his brain is supposed to be. With his sorry-ass survival instincts, he strolls right in. He gets immediately spooked like a bitch by falling rocks, but recovers enough to explore the cave and even finds it cozy.
Cozy, huh?
He spawns a tent and lantern from his bag like a noob hack. That night, he makes a fire, checks his stats, and learns he is slightly less useless than before and has gained new skills, finally pulling his weight. Before crashing, he whines about having no girlfriend, knowing full well his loser vibes scare the baddies away. Haru wakes up smug, knowing his gear kept him from becoming a monster's hot dinner. He whips up a gourmet breakfast, which is just fried mushrooms and cured meat scraped from his bag. He takes one bite and nearly bursts into tears of joy. The slop tasted so unreal, he could give Gordon Ramsay a run for his money.
Wow, that looks like a pile of defrosted snow with bear shit sprinkled all over it.
He's extra excited for his magic bag that just spawns pans, knives, and tents like a loot piñata. With this crap, he could start a wildlife survival channel. But let's be real, he is so lazy, he would rather nap than slave away editing footage like that try-hard Anageek. Speaking of which, smash that like button and subscribe, my fellow otakus. He goes gathering herbs and mushrooms again when he hears 2 goblins, frolicking with the single brain cell they share. He hides like a coward until realizing they're smaller than his balls. Unfortunately, his only weapon is his tiny twig. In order to make it more effective, he infuses it with his packing magic before using it to bash the unfortunate goblins, knocking them both out but with multiple hits and a burst of magic. He then washes up his stinking sweaty face in the same river he drinks from for some reason before calling it a day. When he goes home to his man cave, he notices to his delight that his skills have leveled up and he'd gained some new ones too. The next morning, our boy wakes up craving something that isn't a mushroom breakfast. He thinks about hunting for meat, but is afraid his vegan class rep would disapprove. Having no choice, he chokes down his disgusting mushrooms before deciding to work out. After lazing around for a while, he starts training using magic rap to enhance his abilities. He finds out this makes him super fast, so he proceeds to bully some unwise goblins with it. Haru spends the next few days doing the same thing, hunting for mushrooms, bullying goblins, and building furniture for his cave. Soon enough, he is able to defeat goblins easily, and even pimps out his crib. That night, he goes hunting again, and he's fortunate enough to find an unfortunate rabbit. He chases it down, believing he is about to have the meat he desperately desired when he suddenly figures out he isn't alone. He hides and tries to figure out what is going on. To his surprise, his classmates are wandering the area in their little groups with their room temperature IQs. Haru sees that his dinner has been ruined and lets the rabbit go.
I feel heroic and handsome. I'm a little wet, but I still look good. I look good.
He wonders if he should walk up to the class rep since she was so nice to him. However, he decides that was simp behavior and he much preferred his Sigma lifestyle anyway. Haru, with his non-existent survival skills, makes a noise, and all of his classmates turn to see what's making the noise. The fool hides behind the bushes, praying he doesn't get caught. Luckily, he has nothing to worry about, as nature decides to do him a solid when the rabbit he was hoping to feast on distracts his classmates, draw their attention away from him. He decides to hang around the group of delinquents and listen in on what they are talking about. Since they are normal horny teenagers, the only thing they can yap about is their class rep's huge mommy milkers. The boys catch one of the weebs, Tanaka, and interrogate him about their abilities before going back to their camp. When the coast is clear, Haru makes it back to his cave to have his usual dinner of mushrooms and incel energy. He notices his loner levels have gone up since the universe is sick of him having no friends. Nevertheless, he detects he has new skills, one of them being Master of None, that makes him have the attention span of a cracked-out hamster, but also enables him to do much more. He gets tired of his mushrooms and decides to call it a night. Still, he can't sleep. A loud commotion just outside his cave is keeping him awake. Haru goes out to check on the cause and discovers the nerds in his class were trying to fight off some goblins. Haru thinks about helping them, but uses his clairvoyance to check their stats first. He finds out they were at a higher level than him already. He figures that being the nerdy, anime-addicted losers, they probably knew plenty about surviving an isekai. Haru turns around to leave, but notices another group of goblins approaching the nerds with clubs from behind. He reluctantly decides to help them, jumping into the fight and taking out the goblins on his own. The nerds thank him for saving them as he invites them to spend the night in his cave. The nerds are super impressed by how pimped out his home was. Haru asks them why they were all alone by that time of the night, and they hesitate for a little before confessing they were on the run. It all started when they were first isekai'd without Haru. The girls had broken down, crying and calling for their mothers to come rescue them. Meanwhile, the nerds had dreamed of this day their entire lives. They immediately started devising strategies to survive in the new isekai world. But before they could even finish forming a single party, the local delinquents rolled in and threatened to beat them up, unless they helped them too. With the rest of the class panicking, the class rep had told them to calm down only to get interrupted mid-speech by an entire battalion of goblins bursting in like unwanted DLC. The class had been terrified. Even the fake alpha male delinquents had pissed their pants, but the nerd squad was ready. They had already summoned their special weapons and were fully prepared to use them. Rallying behind the nerds, the class had somehow managed to fight off the goblins in a chaotic but effective battle. Afterward, the class rep had led everyone to form a little campsite by the bank of a river. She took charge of the camp, organizing everyone into neat little groups to maximize survival. But of course, the class Karens can't just be happy. Despite being objectively useless, they had loudly insisted that they wouldn't be participating in the camp chores. The class rep had tried to convince them to stay and contribute, but the girls walked out on her. Some of the brain-dead classmates had followed them, like sheep chasing after wolves. After they left, only the nerds and a few other decent students had stayed behind to help the class rep organize the camp. Meanwhile, the meat-headed delinquent bros had decided to spend their time leveling up in hope of creating their own harem of ladies.
Man, there you go with that bullshit.
Because they collectively had the intelligence of a carnival goldfish, they hadn't even bothered to keep their little plan a secret. The weebs had overheard it and immediately snitched to the rep. She'd baited the delinquents into attacking her, and then effortlessly knocked them out, one after another, before exposing them to the class. Afterwards, the delinquents were kicked out of camp like expired milk.
He needs some milk!
However, the delinquents returned to destroy the camp in a dramatic act of revenge. But instead of blaming the actual culprits, the Karens pointed at the nerds, accusing them of inciting the violence. The class rep had tried to defend them and begged the others to see reason, but the nerds had been handed their walking papers, so they walked away with dignity. Haru is happy that for once, he isn't the biggest loser in the class and throws a mushroom party for his fellow social failures.
What the hell kind of party is this?
The next day, as they leave, they invite him to join their incel club since he was already like them. He decides to Aura farm instead, telling them he wants to remain alone.
A lone, lonely loner.
He finds the former campsite of his classmates, but to his surprise, it is empty. Using his clairvoyant skill, he searches the area for any signs of life. Sure enough, he spots his female classmates lazing around the woods. However, he panics and tries to flee because he is a Riz-less wimp who is scared of women. They give him a hot chase and Haru runs for his life because a forest full of monsters was safer than being around these crazy Delilah baddies.
I completely agree.
To his surprise, they call out to him and beg him to help them find the nerds so they can apologize. Haru doesn't trust their true motives since they are usually mean. He tries to scare them away by mentioning the abundance of monsters in the forest. However, this just makes them more scared and they beg to stick around with him until they find the weebs. They promise to form a harem with him as their almighty Sigma King and Haru predictably caves. This immediately unlocks his servitude skill, which binds them to him like obedient lapdogs. They follow him around and Haru discovers that they are truly savage when they hunt down and slaughter any monsters they come across. He notices one of them is hurt after walking for so long, so he offers her medicine. The airhead, called Shimazaki for some unknown reason, throws the medicine at Haru's face, soiling his clothes. Haru is disgusted by the smell of this medicine and suddenly has a mild crash out over having to be stuck with these BBL baddies. While crashing out, the class rep finds him muttering to himself like a drug addict in the subway. She is happy to see him and tries to get his attention, but he doesn't even acknowledge her presence. This forces her to scream his name, knocking him out of his trance. Our MC sees that she brought along all the nerdy girls from their class. They are tired, grumpy, and ready to stress him out with more nagging. The class rep notices the baddies who are still under his servitude spell and asks why they look so weird. Haru tries to explain but discovers he doesn't even understand what is going on. He tells the class rep that they are now his subs, which makes her mad. He adds that he didn't do it on purpose, but this doesn't stop the other girls from staring at him like he was a creep. Haru decides he's done with their BS and turns around to go home, but they stop him from leaving. The class rep walks up to the lead, Shimazaki, shaking her until she snaps out of the trance. Haru tries to use the distraction to slip away back to his quiet little cave, but this nightmare stops him. He sits alone, fuming at his condition while the baddies explain what happened. They seem to tell the truth, however, so the class rep thanks Haru for saving their asses. He accepts their gratitude and asks if he can go home now. The lazy baddies are surprised he already has a home in the forest, so they begin to discuss how to invade his man cave and turn it into a sorority house for IG thoughts. Haru imagines having all his fantasies fulfilled for one night, so he immediately agrees. He leads them through the forest into his beautiful cave that now resembles a girl's dream mansion. The girls take over his home, throwing off their stinking clothes to use his luxurious bathroom. This forces poor Haru to sleep outside in a tent. However, he doesn't mind because he prefers being alone to being surrounded by the girl chatter. Before he can fall asleep, the class rep comes into the tent to thank him for being such a simp. She complains that the other boys left them to survive on their own, but he was down bad enough to let them freeload off his hard work. The class rep then confesses that she feels sad since she was almost useless compared to the nerds. Haru takes the opportunity to simp even harder. He throws the nerds under the bus and tells her they knew what they were doing because they spent their lives in the real world preparing for this. The class rep does a reverse Uno and points out that he is even more prepared than the nerds, meaning he was an even bigger loser.
Well, she's got a fair point.
She then leaves him alone in his tent where he falls asleep, to dream about clapping those milky cheeks. The simp lord and his wood wake up to a baddie from the mansion in his tent. She slides over to his position, asking if he was ready for breakfast. Haru is distracted by the sight of a woman next to his bed in the morning. However, the moment she mentions fried fish, he instantly gets excited, knocking his forehead into hers. He rushes outside to chow the fish like a barbarian. The class rep asks how he can live close to the river and not have any fish. He replies the fish are faster than you in bed, and more slippery than your sister sliding into my DMs. He asks them how they caught the fish since they are girls who can barely survive alone. They show him how they use lightning to electrocute the fish in the river. He asks them to show him again, but this time uses his packing magic to enhance the lightning, killing even more fish. This action activates his ability to use elemental magic. The girls accuse him of cheating, but he replies it isn't his fault. The senile grandpa gave him this power. He is able to copy this magic because his packing skill combines with his Master of None skill. This means, even if they are both individually useless, together they go harder than his rager for the class rep. He asks what their plans are, and the class rep replies that they are going into the nearby town, just like the nerds. Haru suspects they are only going after the nerds again, but the thoughts insist they aren't. He decides to take his simping a step further and train the girls to up their levels. However, he finds out they all have much higher levels than his sorry ass. While he is languishing at 7, the lowest among them was 16. Maybe he was the useless dead weight here. He wonders what he can possibly teach them, but notices something weird. The bush behind them is rustling on its own. Seeing this as an opportunity, he parts the bushes and asks the girls to train by defeating the wolves who were hiding under there. The girls are pretty sure they can take on such tiny wolves. Nevertheless, when it is all over, the wolves send them back to the kitchen. Apparently, they thought they could hit the wolves without the little beasts fighting back.
Women.
The girls hold their performance review meeting in Haru's tent, trying to figure out why they were completely useless. They finally end the meeting and go out for a rematch. But the girl who had woken Haru up that morning stays behind. She apologizes to him, but confesses she was testing him. She wanted to know if he was a gentleman or a jerk who would take advantage of her. Still, he accepts her apology. And the next morning, she wakes him up with a delicious roasted fish. While he snacks happily, he overhears the girls preparing to go in for their rematch with no preparation. However, the class rep, being the only girl in the class with her brain still functioning, stops their nonsense. She reminds them they need to train to level up if they are going to stand a chance. They begin their training with some low-level goblins. Unsurprisingly, the goblins beat them so badly, it set back women's rights by a few decades. Nevertheless, they keep up with the training until sometime later, they are ready to fight the wolves. This time, they work together as a team and beat the wolves, proving once and for all, they were at least more useful than a calculator in an Asian kid's backpack.
Come on. Do math.
The class rep thanks him for his help and invites him to come to town with them. The next morning, Haru attempts to pack everything he possibly can in his bag before leaving. He even manages to convince the girl who gave him breakfast to stay back and look after his mansion, but the class rep stops them. She insists everyone must follow the group. Haru then tells her that if they have any chance of surviving that forest, they would need to work together. Deep in the forest, one of their classmates is being pursued by a hooded figure, and just like in horror movies, he forgets how to run, so he trips and falls. The figure catches up to him and starts choking him while the boy begs for his life until his life subscription expires. The figure then walks away. Haru and the girls don't make it far into the forest when they come across an ugly orc with the IQ of a rock. Haru, thinking he is a white knight, asks the girls to stand back so he can take it on by himself. However, he is only armed with his tiny wood. He charges the orc, who tries to stop him with his giant wood. but is slower than my little brother doing math. Haru dodges the swing easily, but notices physical attacks don't work on the orc. He remembers the nerds telling him it can only be defeated using magic. He pulls up his skill stats, seeing he only has elemental magic at his disposal. Before he can decide on what to use, the orc attacks him again, but he dodges it yet again. He is even able to land a hit using his tiny wood. Shockingly, this actually sends the orc to orc heaven. He decides to try fire magic on the next orc, with great results. That night, while the girls cook their sad excuse for dinner, Haru sets magical traps to protect their camp. He then uses his appraisal skill to open up Google Maps to figure out their route out of the forest. However, he is interrupted by strangers in the woods. He prepares to fight, thinking it was the delinquents, but it turns out it's just the jocks who are nice. He asks them if they are being creeps by stalking the girls. They say they are actually looking for him. Haru suspects they want to fiddle with his sausage, but they instantly shut that down. They tell him they are hunting for a skill apparently even more powerful than the puppetry and mesmerize skill the delinquents had developed. Haru remembers seeing the skill called hijack on the skill board when it was summoned. The jocks point out that when the delinquents were flexing their puppetry skill, nobody had mentioned hijack, meaning the jocks probably didn't even know about it. Haru figures out they think he is in possession of the skill, and they admit it even though they say they wouldn't mind. Haru clarifies that he has another skill called servitude, which makes him a glorified pet sitter. They warn him about hijack and tell him to apologize to the class rep before leaving. However, the class rep's nosy self was already eavesdropping like a jealous ex. The next morning, Haru tells the girls to prepare their equipment for their training. To his surprise, these thirsty Jurikei girls act super hyped about it. Haru's confused, wondering if they found some questionable mushrooms or something. As he walks off to lead the way, the class rep asks to talk to him alone. He quickly accepts, thinking she wanted to give him a special morning routine. Instead, she confesses that she listened in on his conversation the previous night like a jealous girlfriend. Before she can finish, Haru coldly tells her he knows she is the only student with the hijack skill. She asks why he hasn't done anything to stop her since it's a dangerous skill. Haru replies that the nerds knew about it, but did nothing since they trusted her with it. He further clarifies that he also trusted her since he knew she wouldn't turn into the Austrian artist with such power.
Ah, most people say Hitler.
The class rep, relieved once again that her class boys were either incels or simps, thanked him. He somehow gets uncomfortable and sprints into the forest, leaving her longing for a taste of his meat.
I'd like to press his meat.
The girls go back to training. This makes them thirstier than they already are, and Haru takes the opportunity to sell some of his juices. As expected, they get thirstier than ever. Haru sees the moment and starts selling his special juice like a broke hustler. One of the broke bimbo girls tries to trade her expired body for a taste. Haru, being the forever horny fool, actually considers it, but the class rep shuts that down like a traffic cop. They continue on their walk into the forest until Haru spots a stream ahead. Getting an idea, he asks the class rep if he could scout ahead. The class rep is suspicious of the smirk on his face and asks him to let her tag along, but Haru takes off immediately. Infusing his body with multiple skills, he is able to perform superhuman feats like jumping, running, and even sometimes flying at superhuman speeds. He uses the weight manipulation skill to make himself more agile and his reflexes quicker. Then, he moves through the trees like a monkey on cocaine, and eventually starts floating. There, he is able to catch a view of the entire forest, realizing they are almost out of it. However, while floating, he runs out of momentum, and he drops from the sky like my grades back in high school. He lands hard on the ground, but survives with only a few bruises. That night, the class rep nags him back in the camp, reminding Haru of his mother. The next day, they continue and after a few trials, finally make it out of the forest and are one step closer to their goal. Before reaching town, they have to cross a giant grassy field. Haru discovers his walking skill evolved into airwalk, basically anime Jesus powers. He uses it to walk above ground like he owns the sky. From up there, he sees some helpless wagon NPCs being attacked by monsters. He comes down and tells the class rep, who suggests the fastest members of the group to go and help. Haru, however, decides to go alone. He uses his weight manipulation skill to lighten his body, and uses his elemental skill to create bursts of wind to propel himself. This genius move gives him the ability to fly at great speeds. Nevertheless, he is slowed down by the class rep who had unknowingly held onto his cloak when he took off.
Dumbest thing you could have said! What are you, an idiot?
Their combined weights make it impossible for him to fly, and they both crash heavily into the monsters like a torpedo, knocking them out. While Class Rep is out cold, the grateful NPCs thank Haru for saving their low-leveled asses. Their leader, some guy named Gafk, says they were hired to hunt wolves but got clapped hard. They glaze Haru for saving their weak ass from total destruction. He appreciates their gratitude and even offers them some of his mushrooms as snacks. One of the NPCs discovers the shrooms are basically like performance-enhancing drugs which healed them and returned their energy. They share the shrooms around the entire group. Haru, however, is too jealous of the fact that the camp has a lot of baddies for the NPC men to enjoy. Before he can do anything stupid, however, the class rep stops him. Soon enough, the rest of the girls make it to the location and are intrigued by the elves following the convoy. The adventurers decide to pay Haru back by guiding him and the girls into the city. The class gets to the bustling town full of life. Meanwhile, Haru isn't impressed because he feels out of place being the emo loner in this town. Some of the girls instantly trash their senses and get distracted by the clothing shops, since apparently that's all they can think about.
Yeah, women be shopping.
Haru starts planning his great escape since, in his mind, the escort mission is over. Meanwhile, the girls are out here acting like unsupervised toddlers. One of the brain-dead gremlins even tries to eat a building, thinking it's a cupcake. The class rep, who's stuck playing the mom role for this circus, asks Haru to help. But Haru's already spiritually retired. Tired from pulling the weight of these glorified NPCs, he lets her deal with it. The class rep takes matters into her own hands, summoning the girls with her whistle. She decides they will register in the Adventurers Guild by selling off some of the loot they gathered so far. After that, they would retire for the day before looking for the nerds the next day. The Valley girls are not happy she isn't searching for the nerds immediately. Haru is sure they just want some nerd D, but they deny it. They get to the Adventurers Guild, a massive stone building with some adventurers inside. The adventurer they rescued earlier, Gafk, invites Haru in to talk to the boss. However, Haru notices they are all big, ugly men while he is just a wimpy, little kid. Even worse, the guild boss is a big scary man with a mustache that looked like he borrowed it from Captain Hook. Regardless, it turns out the boss is father-friendly and only thanks Haru for saving his men. Haru quickly leaves the room before things get awkward. He sees a little shop where he can pawn the loot he gathered. Upon getting there, he finds out he's so rich, the shop can't even afford to pay for his gems. He promises to come back the next day to complete the appraisal. Before he can leave, the girls rush in to tell him they registered with the adventurers. The barrier for entry is so low that even the Karens got in. This explains why there are so many monsters roaming the world. Haru admits that in addition to their OP skills, they also leveled up on their way to the town. The girls force him to register, and he eagerly walks to the counter. Unfortunately, the lady in charge of registration tells him his level is too low to meet their standards. He had to be at least a level 10. Haru collapses to his knees, realizing he was still a loser no matter what. The lady further explains he needed to be at least a level 20 if he was a loner. The class rep tries to cheer him up by inviting him to spend the night with their class in a fancy hotel. Haru notes the hotel is designed to facilitate some hanky-panky, but the rep shuts him down immediately. The next morning, Haru decides to leave the town since there was nothing left there for him. He goes to receive the money for his gems, but it turns out the shop had run out of cash. They were only to give him $8 million, which makes him richer than Elon Musk in their world. The girls, seeing Haru was now rich, decide it's time to spend his money. Gafk informs the MC that he knows a perfect place for him to spend his new fortune. Haru begins to imagine a strip club with hot women, like the addict Gunnar he is. It turns out to be a run-down place for old artifacts with a sketchy owner. Gafk assures him the owner is a nice guy, even though he looks like he isn't allowed near school children. Haru does find a bunch of great equipment in the shop, and he shops like an Instagram baddie on vacation. Before he leaves, he finds a strange necklace that has number 7 on it. He asks the shopkeeper what it means, and he replies that the necklace would enable Haru to fuse multiple items. Before he can buy more equipment, the class rep comes to remind him it is past his bedtime.
Are you serious right now, bro? Like, are you serious right now?
Haru accidentally knocks the items over, thereby fusing all of them together. The shopkeeper freaks out as Haru had fused before paying, and it all cost 10 million. Haru skimps out on paying the full price, but he's forced to pay with everything he owes. This leaves him as broke as me. He wants to go outside to earn more gems, but he's unable to since he wasn't a member of the Adventurers Guild. He thinks about sneaking out with the girls, but none of them trust him anymore, meaning he was stuck. He decides to sneak out using the invisibility cloak he bought from the shopkeeper. Luckily, it works, and as soon as he is out free in the streets, because he has only half a brain cell, he takes off the cloak before he leaves the village. As he is about to leap over the wall, he gets distracted by some of the girls who spot him. This makes him smash his precious nutsack, which has been left dormant for years. He discovers the group of girls who spotted him was missing one member, the girl who wanted his juice so much, she was willing to strip for it. Realizing she was probably up to no good, he and the other girls find her about to get down to her birthday suit. They then stop her from becoming a fan service meme. The next day, the class rep puts him in timeout for trying to escape. While the girls go out on quests, he is stuck in the tower, grounded like a little child, but he has other plans. As soon as they leave, he puts on his invisibility cloak. This time, he has enough IQ points to keep it on till he leaves the village. Underway into the woods, he comes across a couple of bandits harassing a girl in her carriage. He decides it's not his problem and tries to ignore them, but the bandits stop him because he is a witness to their crime. Haru is forced to spawn a new staff to defend himself. He notes he hasn't seen the staff before, but either way uses it to discipline the bandits with fire magic. He admits that the stick must have been a result of the fusion of the equipment he bought earlier. The bandits are even more pissed and proceed to attack him. Fortunately, they are all base-level NPCs, so he disciplines them with even more vigor. The bandits think he is a high-level adventurer, but he tells them he is an unemployed loser like them. This makes them even more embarrassed, so they intensify the attack on him. Haru admits that their moves are powerful, but they have no sense of strategy, so they keep spamming it at him. He dodges all of them until they get exhausted and literally pass out. While they lay on the ground, the owner of the carriage, a little girl named Miriel, comes out. She thanks him for saving her and tells him she is a member of the town's royal family. Haru thinks she's just another airhead, but she pulls herself together. She asks him to accompany her as a glorified bodyguard for the rest of her trip. He agrees after she promises him a reward. Haru isn't impressed by her royalty since the town had done nothing but piss him off since he got there. Deep in the forest, the jocks face off against the delinquents who are looking for the girls. One of the delinquents leaps to attack, but he is suddenly stabbed through his back, killing him instantly by the hooded stranger. The other delinquents try to attack, but he is way too powerful for them. He blocks their attacks and slays them using their own weapons. The jocks see the guy is clearly out of their league and try to run away. However, he catches up with them before they can get far. Back in the village, Haru whines like a little bit as Miriel drags him to her home. However, he is impressed by her father's mansion and their family portraits. He still tries to sneak away when he thinks nobody is looking, but instead of using his invisibility cloak, he once again forgets that literal cheat code exists and tries to just walk away. As expected, the princess catches him. She insists she must be allowed to show him gratitude by treating him well. Haru gives in and accepts her hospitality. Next, she feeds him a feast fit for royalty, and our gremlin MC devours it like he hasn't eaten in 12 years.
I can't help myself. I like good food, okay?
Still not done being extra, she gives him a VIP ID card that lets him enter and leave the town anytime. Haru doesn't even react, just keeps munching while she sulks like a rejected Tinder date. But he's in full Sigma mode, so feelings are off the menu. The next day back in his hotel, the girls grill him over where he had disappeared to. He tells them he got invited to the noble's house, but lies that he doesn't know why. The girls have no choice but to believe him. However, before she leaves, the class rep again asks him to stay put. He agrees without arguing, but as soon as they are out the door, he disappears. Before he leaves town, he buys some food and writes a note to the class rep explaining himself. He then walks up to the guard at the gate, showing her his ID card. She lets him by and Haru is free to be a loner again. Walking through the forest, he realizes he misses his former life. Even if he was always hungry and fighting, anything was better than hanging out with his harem. He doesn't go too far before a monster attacks him. He knocks it down quickly enough with his stick. He learns that the equipment he bought from the town meant he was stronger now, but something about the forest still felt wrong. He explores a bit further and finds blood on the ground, surprising him. He wonders who it belongs to, guessing it had to be one of the nerds, delinquents, or the jocks. Using his tracking skill, he is able to pick up the trail of the jocks. He follows it and finds all 4 of them lying on the floor, lifeless. He panics and douses them with his special fluids until they wake up. After they confirm that the girls are okay, they tell him what happened with the stranger and the delinquents. Haru asks about the nerds, but the jocks say they aren't sure about their fate. They inform him that the stranger is not only a math genius, but also stole their weapons. They go ahead to tell him he is after the class rep's hijack skill. Haru is shocked because he thinks only him and the nerds know about it. The jocks tell him they found out because the guy was insistent on knowing the rep's location. He then beat them to a pulp and waited to see if anyone who rescues them will lead him to the class rep. However, because Haru had dragged them to his cave, the stranger would target Haru instead. The jocks offer to help Haru fight him, but he turns them down because how else is he supposed to Aura farm? However, the jocks can tell by the look on his face that he has a plan. He then tells them to go to the town and protect the girls. Even though he knows he would have an easier time winning with the jocks on his side, Haru knows if they lose, the girls will be defenseless. Because of this, he decides that he needed to train even harder if he was going to defeat the stranger. He starts researching how to win. From what he learned during his earlier fights with the bandits, Haru knows the weapons are basically single use. Once activated, they cannot be cancelled. He needed a skill that didn't have that weakness. While thinking, he is interrupted by some goblins attracted to the blood everywhere. So he attempts to farm some XP points by beating them, but it doesn't work. Still figuring out why this happened, he is attacked by a giant troll wielding a massive hammer. Haru only barely evades him before fusing his various skills into his staff. Using this power-up, he one-shots the giant troll and knocks him out. Before he can celebrate, he's blindsided by another cracked-up-looking goblin. Again, he barely manages to dodge the attack before appraising the new threat. To his surprise, its level is extremely high. Haru fuses his skills in the staff again and tries to one-shot the goblin. This time it doesn't work, and the goblin launches a counterattack that almost hits Haru. He is able to push back with his new skill Gambit, but the goblin heals immediately. He then hits Haru with a giant energy slash that knocks him into the trees, almost taking him out. Haru understands that for the first time, he might be cooked. However, he remembers that the jocks survived an even worse fate than him, so he decides to give it one more push. This time, it is successful. He lands the hit, killing the goblin and finally leveling up to 11. He makes it back to his pimped-up cave. He checks his stats and sees his Gambit skill was confirmed, meaning he has found a way to beat the stranger. The next morning, the hoodie menace finally shows up at the cave. Haru watches him take off the hood and, surprise, it's Tanaka. Tanaka's mad because he was hoping the jocks would lead him to the class rep, not the class reject. Haru asks if everything was planned, and Tanaka brags like every edgy anime villain ever. Then casually mentions he already killed all the boys from the class. Tanaka asks Haru to get his filthy prick out of his face, but he refuses. Tanaka smiles menacingly, telling him he was about to die and starts booting up his power. He brags about how could tell Haru picked the trashy skills before hurling a bunch of rocks at him, using his metal skill to disrupt the MC's mobility. However, Haru is able to dodge the rocks. Tanaka replies that he is impressed before activating 2 glowing testicles. He merges them into a single nut and causes a bunch of jagged crystals to emerge from the ground, trying to cripple Haru. Haru leaps back from the chaos, managing to avoid a torn ACL. The dickhead then asks Haru when he started suspecting him. Haru replies that he was acting sus when he was hanging out with the delinquents. Tanaka is impressed by his deduction skills, realizing he wasn't as stupid as he previously believed. Haru asks the Four-Eyed Dweeb when he plans to launch his evil takeover. Four Eyes replies that it was as soon as they got isekai'd and he realized he had missed out on hijack. Tanaka then suddenly summons some twine from the ground to tie up Haru's ankles, before covering in fire. Just as he thought he had won, Haru absorbs the flames using his wonderful wood, to Four Eyes' surprise. He then uses the opening created by Tanaka, wasting his weapon skills to launch an attack. However, just as he is about to strike, the target summons a massive sword and blocks his attack. Haru figures out the opening attack from the dickhead was just a distraction for Haru to expose his tactics. In order to flex even harder, he summons a bunch of weapons to select one to finish Haru. He decides to use them on Haru, who is pissing his pants right now. Haru is unable to predict exactly where each attack is coming from, so Tanaka starts pressing his advantage. He finally lands a big hit on Haru, sending him across the river, crashing in its banks. Four Eyes follows him closely, asking if he is done. Haru detects that the Edgelord has so many weapons, it is almost impossible to predict his attack pattern. He then figures out that the reason the dork has so many skills was because he copied those of his classmates using the skill copycat. Tanaka admits this, and Haru guesses he wants to use it to copy the class rep's hijack, making him practically a god. In other words, his plan was to kill the class rep and steal hijack. After that, he would kill everyone else, stealing their skills. Four Eyes continues his attacks and Haru tries to counter, but finds absolutely no openings. The dipstick, seeing Haru tired, thinks he has got him where he wants him and charges at him from behind. However, Haru smirks, sidestepping him quite easily. He whispers to Tanaka that he had figured out his secret. The four-eyed goober could only use 3 skills at the same time. Tanaka gets frustrated realizing he can't land hits anymore, but Haru isn't done mogging him yet. He tells Four Eyes that he baited him to unleash all those attacks earlier. That way, our boy can study them for weakness. This was how he figures out that Tanaka only uses the same skill twice because he doesn't want to use up his 3 chances. Nevertheless, the red-headed moron is still delusional about his abilities, so he charges head-on at Haru. Our boy leaps out of the way easily and slams his hard wood into Tanaka's belly, sending him flying. Haru tells him he doesn't care about his delusions and proceeds to smack the red out of his hair. Before he can land a last hit, Tanaka pulls a reverse Uno and lays off a fireball at him, which Haru has to pause to dodge. He understands that the little prick might be a low testosterone loser, but he was still quite powerful. He summons his ultimate weapon, a dagger Haru hasn't seen before. He then moves towards Haru at an impossible speed, attacking him from all directions. Haru manages to survive this assault, but the dust Tanaka raises obscures his vision. As our boy tries to figure out what Tanaka's real attack is, Four Eyes hides behind a rock, loading up his final deadly skill known as Instant Death. He hits Haru with it, sending a bunch of ghost skulls to literally suck the life out of Haru. Haru draws his last breath and collapses a lifeless corpse. Four Eyes laughs maniacally, standing over Haru's body and even stomping on his head. He congratulates him for making him go all out, before he turns to go after hijack. After taking a few steps, he hears a voice call out to him. He turns around to see Haru standing there, oozing aura and completely unfazed. Tanaka is shocked as he is sure the Instant Death skill has a 100% success rate. Haru explains that Instant Death was a skill under the status rebuff category. However, he possessed the skill Well-Being, which made him resistant to all status rebuffs. In addition to this, his luck skill was maxed out. This buff significantly reduced Instant Death's effectiveness. Tanaka asks why Haru fell so dramatically. Haru replies he wanted to feed Four Eyes' delusion over the strength of Instant Death. This asshat then wonders why his meddling skill didn't fully resist Haru's mobility, but Haru used a puppeteer's skill to control himself, dodging the attacks even when the meddling was restricting him. Tanaka loses his mind over being beaten by a loser with just trash skills. He starts swinging at Haru desperately, but to no effect. Haru tells him his math and logic won't work in this world of magic and fantasy. Four Eyes finally gets that he might be a genius with powerful skills, but he lacked one thing: plot armor. He lunges at Haru again, but our boy easily knocks his sword away. Tanaka tries one last move, telekinetically using the sword to stab Haru from range. He then claims he won and starts slashing at Haru with his sword. Regardless, Haru knocks him out before using the Gambit skill to finish him off. As Tanaka collapses, Haru leaves the scene as the victor. However, he is completely exhausted and doesn't believe he will make it out alive. Before he passes out, the nerds appear from nowhere and catch him before he falls. They give him medicine to drink before helping him walk back to the town. He asks how they found him, and they explain how everyone in town had told them he was fighting alone. The jocks had informed the girls earlier, so they passed the message when the nerds asked them. They finally get back to the town where everyone is happy to see him. The Karens finally apologize to the nerds for their treatment earlier, and Haru decides to use the opportunity to sneak away. However, the girls catch him on his way out, before dragging him back to town, promising to tie him up if he keeps trying to get away. That night, Haru dreams about a demon deep in the dungeons, in the shape of a hooded skeleton. Even worse, it is covered by a dark aura that makes it even scarier. Haru wakes up like a confused squirrel, wondering what the dream meant, but he shrugs it off, like the clueless dingus he is, and heads out to meet the nerd squad. These four-eyed gremlins say they're heading on a dungeon expedition to find a skill that'll boost their riz and make the crusty girls stop ignoring them. Haru tells them they're better off booking therapy and some heavy-duty plastic surgery. The nerds clap back, saying even that wouldn't save his sorry face, then waddle away like insulted penguins. Thinking he's done enough socializing for a week, Haru decides to sneak back to his forest shack. But our brain-dead boy forgets, once again, that he's packing an invisibility cloak, and instantly gets caught by the class rep before he even takes 2 steps. She looks more pissed than a teacher after checking your group project. She's not here to play games, and tells him if he tries pulling a solo mission again, she'll personally detach his family jewels. Haru surrenders immediately, dropping to the ground like a wet towel, wishing he was fighting Tanaka again instead of this high-level Karen. Honestly, she gave him more childhood trauma than your creepy uncle at Christmas.
I learned about kids jumping on my lap, and I've loved kids jumping on my lap.
After she leaves, Haru realizes he is tired of all these Karens picking on him. He decides to hunt down whatever skills these nerds were looking for so he could make the baddies like him. He walks out of the town, heading towards the dungeons when he suddenly comes across an army of orcs. But Haru isn't scared by them, in fact he sees them as a warm-up. Back in the town, Miriel runs into the tavern to alert the adventurers. News had reached her father that the same horde of orcs is heading for the village. She tells the adventurers that they had already destroyed the neighboring village and were on their way to theirs. The men get ready for battle, but the class rep, not wanting to be left out, offers to join. The adventurer guild master accepts her offer even though the girls are known for being utterly useless. Meanwhile, Haru tears through the orc horde like me at a wedding buffet. Even though he acknowledges there are a lot of them, but they don't offer much resistance. He finally crushes them all, leaving only the Orc King standing. Haru attacks him with a single hit, but the monster deflects it easily. Our boy then follows with a flurry of hits, knocking down the overgrown pig and beating him rather easily. He continues to the dungeons and sneaks in using his invisibility cloak. He searches through the rooms in the dungeons until he comes across a hidden chest full of items. However, using his appraisal skill, he is able to tell they have the same value as what's left on my debit card. He wishes he brought an expert on weapons instead of just relying on ChatGPT like some of you losers. Haru then remembers the sketchy guy who sold him weapons earlier, so he heads back to the town to ask him for help. On his way back, it's already nighttime. To his surprise, he comes across the adventurers and his classmates standing outside the town walls, very well armed. The class rep runs to him and tells him about the horde approaching the village. The morons had been standing outside all day waiting for orcs that didn't even exist anymore. The class rep asks where Haru has been. However, the blockhead couldn't give a good answer, so the girls get pissed at him. The adventurers ask if he saw any orcs on his way. Haru understands what was going on and informs them he had beaten the orcs. The guild members are impressed, but his class isn't. They are pissed that even after scolding him yesterday, he had gone out and gotten himself into trouble. Miriel and the guild boss thank him for saving the village, but also scolds him for being so reckless. They explain the monsters have been acting more aggressive lately, a clear sign that a monster stampede might be on the way. Haru accepts their advice, but doesn't intend to take any of it. In his opinion, the responsible adults have no idea what they were talking about. The next morning, he goes over to see the weapons master who looks like a Voldemort from Temu. When he gets there, Voldemort begs him to leave before he ruins his merchandise again. Haru tells him he isn't here to make any purchases, but instead asks about the favorability skill. Lord Voldemort, relieved Haru wasn't going to rob him blind, tells him about the skill, which was actually a pheromone ring. Haru gets excited and asks him where it was located. Valdi tells him there are 100 floors. Each of them had floor master final bosses, and the ring was on the 50th floor. Furthermore, legend says the dungeon has an old emperor living in there. Haru thanks him for his help before he goes off to restock his weapons. However, they are overheard by the nerds who report the situation to the class rep and the girls. They vow to stop him from undergoing the knuckleheaded mission. While Haru is on his way to the dungeons, the girls intercept him. He denies being in search of the pheromone ring, saying he is looking for the Solomon ring, which would allow him to speak to animals. They don't believe his story, so he dashes past them and all the way to the dungeons. A guard tries to stop them, but gives up when nobody listens to him. He runs into the cave, not worrying about traps since his luck skill was maxed out. He only makes it a few meters before tripping and falling through a weak wall into a dark pit. The class rep tries to catch him but misses his hand. He falls for an eternity down to the 100th floor before using his earth magic to soften the ground, making it bouncy to accommodate his fall. He gets up to explore the dungeon, using his Isekai Google Maps to see the layout of the dungeon. He finds out his trap detection skill is activated, but this pisses him off since he had already fallen into a trap before it was available. Nevertheless, he uses it to check for traps in the hall he is standing in but finds none. However, he finds out that there weren't just 100 floors in the dungeon, there was a deeper 101st floor. As he walks down to explore this new level, the air around him gets thicker with toxic fumes. Regardless, he manages to get through without taking any serious damage. He gets to the floor's door and pushes it open, but he's immediately blasted by a huge gust of powerful wind. Haru figures out that whatever was behind that door was extremely powerful. Sure enough, he opens it to find the demon he saw in his dreams earlier. Its aura is so strong, Haru can barely move. He uses his appraisal skill to check, and to his horror, he finds out it is the Dungeon Emperor, with a power level of 100. None of his skills show any level as they are hidden from any appraisal spell. Even worse, Haru finds out it's a hybrid with multiple powerful races, one of them being the Lick. They were immune to ranged magic, so Haru had to come up close and fight, even for the slightest chance. He pushes through and launches himself at high speed, attacking from multiple angles, but the Lick deflects them all easily, using hypersonic speed. Haru boosts his speed in order to counter the skeleton's hypersonic speed. He tries a strike, but the demon blocks it easily. He goes faster and faster, trying to strike each time but unsuccessful. Suddenly, he sees a vision of the demon stabbing him through his chest. Just as the vision clears, the demon attempts to stab him with his sword. Haru dodges this attack, but figures out the vision showed him the attack even before it happened. He notices that he has gained a skill that lets him see into the future by following the demon's erratic movements. However, he decides that he has to keep on the attack if he is to stand any chance of surviving this. Hours pass and Haru is exhausted, still hasn't landed a hit. For some reason, the realization that he could possibly lose this fight excites him. He tries to go on the attack again, but collapses, too tired to fight. All that battling has depleted his mana and HP. The demon approaches him but stops, not taking this obvious opportunity to finish him off. Haru is surprised. Not only is the demon not attacking him, he can sense no killing intent from it. Haru thinks this is because the demon is underestimating him as he is too weak. He gets angry, rushing at the demon who easily dodges his attack and points his sword at Haru's neck. Haru asks why it isn't trying to kill him, but the demon remains silent. Haru figures out that the demon was actually two different entities. The dark aura was making the skeleton fight him against his will. He then uses his staff to launch another attack, this time trying to absorb the dark energy surrounding the skeleton. It works and Haru is able to absorb it into his stick. The skeleton drops its sword and its guard instantly. Haru asks if it wanted to be killed in order to be free from the demon. The skeleton remains silent but surrenders itself to Haru. As Haru watches it, unsure of what to do, the dark aura in his stick starts escaping. The MC figures out it is trying to reattach itself to the skeleton, but instead of killing the skeleton, he rushes forward and hugs it. He tells it that he knows it is just a loner like him and understands his pain. This repels the dark aura, but also activates the servitude spell which binds the skeleton to Haru as its master. Haru asks if it is mad he used this skill by accident, and the skeleton shakes its head, saying no. Haru accepts his submission and shakes its hand. He uses appraisal to check its stats, seeing it has changed, but also noticing its name was Angelica. He starts panicking because the class rep won't be happy he used servitude on a girl. However, he guesses that since it is a skeleton, it wouldn't be noticed. They try to leave the floor and walk into another level. On this floor, he sees a staircase leading to the higher levels. Before they can climb it, the floor master, a level 100 knight, walks into the room, ready to take them on. Haru figures out he doesn't have the strength to battle it and endeavors to go up by smashing the ceiling using earth magic. As soon as he does this, the ceiling collapses to expose the masters of the floor, 2 level 99 minotaurs, staring down at them. The minotaurs jump down and attack the knight, killing it. However, they take a lot of damage during the fight. Haru is able to finish them off easily, even looting their gems. He notices Angelica is staring at him judgmentally, but tells her to piss off because a win is a win. The skeleton looks at the empty armor of the knight and Haru asks if she wants to wear it. And she affirms, so he allows her to put it on. Initially, it is too heavy, almost bringing down her skinny bones. However, she is able to use magic to make it suit her, even giving the suit more feminine curves. They continue their escape until they reach the floor above. Haru senses a monster, so he uses appraisal to scope around. There, he finds out that the floor master is a level 98 Lich. This is very bad because only divine attacks work on these beings, Haru's physical attacks don't. He thinks about escaping by blowing off the ceiling, but he remembers how that caused him more problems earlier and quickly dismisses the idea. The Lich attacks first, shooting at him with a beam of light. He dodges it, before taking it out with divine magic from his wood, something you should try with your girlfriend. They get to a floor with an army of level 97 giant moths in it. He uses fire magic to create a flame ball that they get attracted to. Then he expands the orb, burning all of them. The next floor has a bunch of caterpillars which he defeats easily, not even breaking a sweat. Then another floor with a boss creature whose body is just a gang of swords. Haru appraises it and to his annoyance, finds out it is at a level 100. He lunges at its blind spot, but he's shocked by how the sword robot easily deflects his strike. Haru is confused on how to attack, but before he can figure out a way, one of the smaller swords the monster keeps around attacks Haru like it has a mind of its own. Haru barely blocks the attack. Struggling to keep up, he suddenly remembers he's got a level 100 Dungeon Emperor on his side. He tags in Angelica, who begins collecting aura points to scare the robot. The robot, however, decides to go aura for aura, changing its attacking style and glowing bright red. However, Angelica isn't here to let it play with her, so she lunges at it head-on and absolutely cuts it in half. Haru is shocked she can beat it so easily even after being nerfed. He thanks his luck she was his ally and not after his ass. Meanwhile, Haru's classmates, the nerds and the girls, are getting spanked by a giant cyclops they had found. They are trying to hold on, but it turns out without Haru, they were pretty useless. The nerds decide to use more than 10% of their brains for once, and come up with a plan to avoid getting turned into lasagna. One of them, Kakizaki, leaps onto it to distract it, while the others prepare an energy blast. The Cyclops, with its tiny brain to skull ratio, takes the bait, swiping him away like a mosquito. However, as Kakizaki falls to the ground, he smiles realizing the plan had worked. One of the girls, Oda, had managed to charge up the blast and hit the Cyclops in its single eye, knocking him out. The class celebrates surviving, but the class rep knows they have to get to Haru soon, or they are finished. Meanwhile, as Haru and Angelica make their way up the floors, the entire dungeon starts to shake from the monster's stampede. A guard posted outside the dungeon is alerted by the rat litters running past him. Surprised, he turns around and to his horror, spots a group of slime monsters approaching him. He freaks out and runs off like a little bitch. The guard makes his way back to the town and alerts the Adventurers Guild that the monster stampede has already begun. In order to figure out how to stop them, the guild master digs up an ancient document about the dungeon. The document explains that the dungeon itself is alive and keeps expanding. Whenever it gets to its final floor, all the monsters in it spill out and stampede. The only way to stop this is to kill the boss on the final floor. They wonder who might be able to do this, and Miriel considers Haru to be a candidate but shakes the thought out of her head. Before they can conclude on anything, the earth starts shaking violently, indicating the monsters were close. The guild master calls off the meeting and orders them to evacuate civilians while they prepare for the assault. Back in the dungeon, Haru and Angelica keep climbing up the floors. They find a group of griffins flying in one of the floors. Haru kills them by feeding them poisoned fish, which causes them to drop to the ground dead. Meanwhile, his classmates keep searching for him until they come across a massive pack of werewolves. Back in the town, the adventurers rest after defeating the first wave of monsters. While waiting for the next wave, one of them brings up the fact that the students were still in the dungeons. The guild master suggests that even though the others are useless, Haru might be able to beat the boss of the final floor. They decide to make Miriel go into the dungeons and inform Haru of this plan. She is scared, but the guild master sends one of the adventurers to escort her. Miriel is still hesitant. However, the sight of the injured adventurers around her moves her to agree. In the dungeon, Haru comes across a floor covered with water and strange whirlpools. Even worse, the water has level 81 piranhas swimming in it. Haru knows he has to use his skill fast if he doesn't want to become fish food. He uses magic to freeze the water and ice barbecues the fish. However, as he and Angelica hop across the floor, they are confronted by the floor's boss. It attacks them with a huge wave, tossing Haru into the water. But he escapes by making a surfboard using earth magic and surfing his way out. Leaping into the air, he slams his stick on the fish's head, knocking it out. They continue through the floors, with Haru collecting special items for some reason. He finds a pilgrim's ring that brings happiness and protects against bad luck, a one-time use blessed bangle, and a necromancy ball. By the time he makes it out of the 76th floor, he has collected a handful of items. He thinks about selling them for money, but decides to give them all to Angelica. She refuses, but Haru insists she takes it to find her own happiness. So she agrees, and their powers immediately start working on her. Haru runs off to continue his exploration, not noticing that Angelica had changed. She removes her helmet to reveal she is no longer a skeleton, but a real human now. She puts the helmet back on and chases after Haru. Back in the 54th floor, the students successfully wipe out the werewolves, but are exhausted from the effort. As they prepare to continue the search for Haru, they hear some footsteps approaching them. They think they are being attacked by more werewolves, but it turns out to be Miriel and the guard. When they tell Miriel how they got separated from Haru, she breaks down completely. The class rep consoles her and assures her Haru will find his way back to them. Meanwhile, on the 74th floor, Haru and Angelica come across a lava-looking lake. He attempts to cross, but the intense heat almost turns him into bacon steaks. Angelica catches his fall and makes him rest in a corner. While thinking of a way to regain stamina, he finds a hole in the wall with cool air flowing in it. He sticks his head in the hole to cool down by using wind magic. As he moans from relief, the breeze carries his voice up the hole, which connects to the 54th floor. The class rep hears his voice and excitedly calls his name through the end of the hole on her floor. Haru figures out this was the hole he fell from and asks them for a rope to climb up, but they have none. He promises to meet them soon, but they inform him of the stampede and how they needed him to defeat the final boss to save the town. Haru figures out they are referring to Angelica and informs them he has already defeated it. The class wonders how it was possible for the monsters to keep spawning if he already defeated them. The guard asks Haru if he actually killed the boss, because the stampede won't stop unless the dungeon's boss is dead. Haru doesn't answer since he had already formed a strong bond with Angelica and wasn't going to kill her off, just to save the town. He then tells them he didn't kill the boss. The guard insists the only way to stop the stampede is the dungeon's boss' death, but Haru ignores him. He tells Angelica he will need her help and announces to his classmates that he will find a way to stop the stampede. The class rep asks if he has a plan and Haru tells her not to worry. She believes him, which shocks Miriel. The class rep defends Haru, reminding the class he has never failed them before even when all hope seemed lost. Haru hears her words, and it strengthens his resolve as he vows to save the townsfolk and Angelica no matter what. Haru speed runs the rest of the floors in the dungeon, icing the lizard men in the 73rd floor into ice cream and burning the scorpions on the 72nd floor with fire magic. On the 70th floor, they encounter a giant, two-headed dog. Haru hurls a magic potion at its face, blocking its sense of smell and distracting it. Angelica takes advantage of this distraction and attacks, cutting the dog in half. After they take it down, Haru decides to sort the items he has collected so far from the slain monsters. Angelica asks him to rest, but he explains he can't pause even for a second because the townsfolk were depending on him. They make their way to the 69th floor, which looks like a forest. On their way through it, they encounter the floor boss, a hypnotizing owl. Haru is confident the owl's powers won't affect him due to his magic nullification skills. Sadly, he is so tired that as soon as the owl hoots, the skill fails to activate and he drops like a wasted college kid. Next moment, The douchebag wakes up being carried by Angelica like a Disney prince, and he thanks her for saving him again. They finally reach the 59th floor. Haru quietly thanks her for carrying him this far, but quickly notices something's wrong. The entire floor is starting to crumble beneath their feet. As he begins to warn her to be careful, he senses a familiar presence above. It's his classmates. They've been completely defeated by the Sphinx and are now entirely at its mercy. The class rep sits motionless in the center of the room, drained and unable to continue the fight. The Sphinx locks onto her and prepares to strike. Before the blow can land, Haru launches upward and lands squarely on the Sphinx's back. He slams his staff into it, disrupting the magic that sustains its immortality. With its invincibility broken, Angelica, who is right behind him, executes the Operation Crocodile Smile by divorcing the Sphinx's head in a single clean strike. The rest of the class watches in stunned silence before rushing over, visibly relieved that Haru arrived in time. As they gather around him, they ask about the armored knight fighting by his side. Haru starts to explain only for the floor beneath him to collapse without warning. He reacts fast and leaps out of the hole just in time, brushing it off by telling the others that he has recently acquired new skills that allow him to sense structural instability. But before he can even finish the sentence, the next section of the floor gives out beneath him again. This time, he's caught off guard. He starts to fall, but the class rep sprints forward, grabs his hand. She then pulls him back up with the help of the boys. With no time to recover, the dungeon is breaking open and monsters are spilling out toward the surface. Haru tells the group he has a plan and that Angelica is the key to stopping the invasion. But before he can explain further, the guard interrupts, warning them that they need to return to town immediately before it's too late. He suggests using a teleportation portal. Haru is stunned because he's unaware one even existed. The guard clarifies that since Haru had been climbing the dungeon from the bottom, the portal had been locked until now. Haru and his classmates manage to make it back to the town just before the horde gets there. But even this doesn't stop the massive numbers from moving anyway. The adventurers defending the town are in shock, seeing the horde approaching their position. Even the guild master is about to lose control of his bladder. The earth rumbles as the giant horde gets closer. All hope is lost. Haru gives Angelica a signal and she nods at him. She draws her sword, smashing it into the ground and creating a powerful electrical current. Haru watches her, marveling at her power. This current expands rapidly, covering the entire area and turning the monsters to dust. When the monsters are gone, Haru walks over and gives Angelica a fist bump while the townsfolk all let out a breath of relief. Nobody else understands what the hell just happened. To clear the confusion, the class rep asks Haru if this was his power. He humblebrags and tells them it's actually her power. One of the nerds figures out she is the Dungeon Emperor, which scares the townsfolk. Haru calms them by explaining how Angelica saved his life multiple times in the dungeon. The adventurers believe him, but the nerd isn't convinced by his explanation. He asks why the stampede still happened if she was so powerful, even more powerful than the floor bosses. Haru calls him a know-it-all, but explains to them that after he placed her under servitude, her level decreased for some reason. Even with this, she still has the power to defeat any monster instantly. Although she only exhibited this ability inside the dungeon, he figured she would still be able to do so if they got close to the stampeding monsters outside. The girls ask what happened to the monsters who had been turned to dust. Haru replies that Angelica merely sent them back to the dungeon for good, meaning the town was safe. They go back into the town and Haru throws a big party inviting his classmates. He informs them that he is giving away the rare items he looted from the dungeon in a scramble sale. The girls go feral and completely knock out the boys, taking everything for themselves. Fortunately, Haru is prepared for this and gives the boys the items he set aside for them. Everyone gets something, which makes Haru happy that he could make their lives easier. Nevertheless, he is worried about Angelica, who is standing by the corner. It seems she is another loner who is unable to fit in. Haru is counting the money he made from selling the loot items to his classmates when the class rep walks into the room. He hurriedly tries to hide his fortune like a teen watching the hub, but she doesn't notice, instead thanking him for gifting the class with the items. Angelica comes in and she thanks her too. She then asks him to introduce her properly to Angelica, which he does. But the rep becomes curious on how he was able to convince such a powerful being to like him. She asks if he used the pheromone ring, but he claims he never found it. She notices his sus attitude and asks him how he did it without the ring. Haru nervously tells her he accidentally used servitude. She yells at him for using the skill and takes Angelica away from him so she can bond with the girls. Haru worries the kids in his class will be too cracked up for Angelica to handle. He thinks she might be capable of defeating a horde of monsters, but nothing was more scary than a bunch of crack-headed teenagers. The class rep takes Angelica to the girl's crib and they start interrogating her like she is Grok. She uses sign language to tell them she is a 17-year-old girl. This makes them excited and they start bombarding her with even more questions. Angelica gets overwhelmed quickly, but the class rep calms her and asks her to take things slowly. The girls then take her to a nice, fancy bathroom to help her clean up. Taking off her armor, they are shocked to discover a beautiful, blonde baddie who could ride you to the 7 heavens, contrasting the skeleton description Haru gave. Meanwhile, Haru finally gets the chance to rest after his dungeon adventure. He checks his stats, noting a lot of them have increased. Because of this, he considers his trip to the dungeons a success even though he didn't get the pheromone ring. Before he sleeps, he acknowledges he couldn't have saved the town without Angelica. The next morning, he decides to return to the forest. He finds the class rep and Angelica eating breakfast at the tavern and tells the rep his plan. She agrees, as long as he promises to come back afterward. He thinks about leaving Angelica behind with the others, but worries she might get lonely. So he asks if she wants to come and she affirms. However, the class rep panics. She doesn't want Haru learning the truth about Angelica having a body. She stops him and demands to know why he's taking her. Haru asks what the problem is, and she recognizes she doesn't even know if she's protecting Angelica or just jealous. So she allows them to go, but makes Haru promise to treat his new waifu right. They get to the forest and Haru decides to test his new skill, Phase, which makes him extremely fast. He successfully activates it, but after running for a few meters, he loses his balance and slips off a cliff. Fortunately, he is able to make a soft landing. Meanwhile, Angelica, who is running just behind him, slips over some mushroom and falls off the cliff. Haru is able to catch her, but she's embarrassed. They get to his man cave, and he instantly jumps straight into his jacuzzi for a bath. While enjoying the warm water washing his pineapple body, he jokes that Angelica can join him, thinking she was still a skeleton. Unfortunately for him, his servitude skill makes his commands impossible for her to resist, so she strips completely. He is shocked to see a beautiful, barely clothed girl walk into his bathroom, but quickly figures out it is Angelica. He takes her to his room to talk and finds out she can't produce any speech yet since she was a skeleton for too long. Nevertheless, she uses sign language to explain what happened. When she wore the knight's armor, it reproduced her lost flesh on her skeleton for it to fit on. The blessed bangle he gave her removed the curse that made the armor stick to her skin, while the necromancer's orb revived her. The pilgrim's ring maxed out her luck and fully restored her life. Since his gifts to her practically resurrected her, Haru figures she's sticking with him to show her gratitude. He tells her she's free to go as she doesn't need to thank him anymore. However, she only hugs him tighter and tearfully refuses. That's when he understands that she's just lonely, so he yaps her ear off all night. Some time passes and she gets comfortable enough for Haru to convince her to train with him. She agrees but beats the snot out of him the entire day. At the end of it all, he is so beaten up by Angelica, he starts considering an early retirement. After the training, they catch some fish for dinner. Haru has to cook them both a large fish hot pot since he was now clearly her bitch. After the meal, she tries to show gratitude by giving him a full body massage, but does a very bad job. He felt like he had been trampled by 1,000 orcs. But he keeps quiet though, not wanting to make her feel bad. Afterwards, he takes her outside for some stargazing. They sit on a bench and he notices she is a little nervous, sitting far from him. He tries to make her feel more comfortable by patting her head, but she blushes even more and moves away. She then attempts to say thank you, but she cannot form the words. Haru informs her not to bother as he can tell she is trying. He then offers to take her back to the town and she agrees. The next day, they head back. But because the weather's petty, it starts raining hard. Haru grabs her hand and runs. They reach town still holding hands, and boom, anime social explosion. Girls mob Angelica, and boys charge Haru. The guys, being the bunch of virgin gremlins they are, start roasting him for getting a girlfriend. Haru, already tired of their broke energy, shoves them away. Angelica walks over and tries to speak. It's a struggle, but she tries. Haru tells her it's okay. As he turns to leave, she calls out. He stops, shocked. Then she thanks him and walks back to the girls. Haru stands there smiling like a proud dad. He realizes that even though they're all friends, everyone's fighting their own battles. And with that, this unwanted monk wannabe walks off with peace in his heart, and probably back pain from getting beat up by his own waifu. Thanks for watching till the very end, you absolute legend. To throw off the fake fans, drop Hell's Angel in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, let us know your favorite anime down below. We might just recap it next. Catch you in the next one. Stay awesome, stay Anageek.